The old courthouse loomed cold and ominous that Monday morning, its marble steps worn from the cumulative tread of footsteps leading to a fate that would shake an entire city. Sarah Thompson, 35, black, mother of 3, wedged up those steps with her court-appointed lawyer, shaking hands and high head. Inside courtroom 7B, the air was heavy as ice. Sarah sat straight-backed in her chair, in her best navy blue dress, the one she usually saved for Sunday church. Her tired eyes showed 3 months of strain in county jail waiting for this day. A small bottle of prescription pills found in her car without a label that brought her here, even though she tried to explain they belonged to her elderly mother. Judge William Harrison entered the courtroom at precisely 9 a.m. Everyone rose as he made his way to his bench, his black robe billowing behind him like a dark shadow. At 63, he had spent 15 years on this bench, and his penchant for being tough was well known throughout Jefferson County. Not openly discussed, but widely whispered, were the inordinately harsh minimum sentences for minorities. The prosecutor, a young man named David Reynolds, presented a case that seemed routine. Simple possession, no intent to distribute. Similar cases usually resulted in probation, or at most a few months in county jail. Reynolds himself looked uncomfortable as he went through the motions, his voice without the usual force he brought to more serious cases. Sarah's public defender, Mark Wilson, did the best he could with little time and resources. He talked about Sarah's clean record, her volunteer work at the local food bank, and her role as the sole supporter of her 3 children, Michael 14, Lisa 11, and James 8. He explained to him how she worked 2 jobs, morning shifts at the local diner, and evening work as a cleaning supervisor at the city hospital. Your Honor, Wilson said, his voice echoing in the quiet courtroom. Mrs. Thompson is a pillar of her community. The bills in question were her mother's heart medication, while she should have kept them in their original container. This was a simple mistake, not a crime deserving of harsh punishment. Judge Harrison's face remained stone cold. His pale blue eyes never shown warmth during the defense presentation as he looked down from his high bench upon Sarah. The handful of spectators in the courtroom, law students for the most part, or people waiting for their own cases to be called, knew that something was different about this hearing. The turn came for Sarah to speak, and with dignity, she rose to her feet. Your Honor, she said in a steady voice, I know I made a mistake, but my children need me. My mother needs me. I learned my lesson, and I promise you'll never see me in this courtroom again. The judges started with a very long, uncomfortable silence. He shuffled papers on his desk, removed his glasses, and cleaned them slowly with a white handkerchief. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a chill that sent everybody in the courtroom shivering. Mrs. Thompson, he said, enunciating each word, this court has seen too many excuses, too many promises of reform. The law must be upheld, and examples must be made. He paused, putting his glasses back on. Taking into consideration the evidence presented and your apparent lack of respect for the law, I hereby sentence you to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The courtroom erupted in shocked gasps. Sarah's lawyer jumped to his feet. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The sentencing guidelines for this offense. Silence. Judge Harrison's gavel crashed down. One more word, Mr. Wilson, and you'll be held in contempt. BFF removed the prisoner. Sarah stood frozen, her mind unable to process what had just happened. The bio approached her, handcuffs ready, as the cold metal closed around her wrists. She finally broke down, her quiet sobs echoing through the stunned courtroom. Even the prosecutor looked shocked, chuffing his papers nervously and avoiding eye contact with everyone. Law students in the gallery were frantically writing notes, knowing they were witnessing something unprecedented and deeply wrong. As Sarah was led away, her last words echoed through the courtroom. Please, someone call my children's school. They're waiting for me to pick them up today. Judge Harrison stood up and left the bench without another word, his robe flowing behind him as he disappeared through the door to his chambers. He didn't see the tears streaming down Sarah's face, or the look of disgust on the court reporter's face, or the way the bathed gentle helped Sarah walk, clearly uncomfortable with what he had just witnessed. Outside the courthouse, dark clouds gathered as if nature itself was responding to the grave injustice that had just occurred within those walls. None of the people leaving the courthouse that morning knew that this verdict would soon set off a chain of events would shake their city to its very foundation. Mayor James Mitchell sat in his office on the 15th floor of City Hall, reviewing budget proposals for the new community center. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows, casting long shadows across his mahogany desk. At 40, he was one of the youngest mayors in the city's history, and his progressive policies had earned him high approval ratings. His secretary's voice crackled through the intercom, interrupting his concentration. "Mr. Mayor, you need to see this. Channel 7 News is running a breaking story about a sentencing at the courthouse." James reached for the remote and turned on the wool-mounted TV. His coffee cup crashed to the floor as he saw Sarah's face on the screen. The news ticker at the bottom read, "Local mother sentenced to life for minor drug offense." His hands began to shake. Few people knew that Sarah Thompson was actually Sarah Mitchell, his wife of 12 years. They had kept their marriage private to protect their children, and to allow Sarah to live a normal life away from political scrutiny. They lived in different houses during the week, meeting only on weekends at their lake house, where they could be a regular family. "Cancel all my meetings," he ordered through the intercom, his voice fighting for stability. "And get me District Attorney Chun on the phone immediately." As he waited for the call, James paced his office, loosening his tie. A careful plan to keep their marriage private now felt like a terrible mistake. He hadn't even known about Sarah's arrest. She must have kept it from him to protect his political career, just as they had agreed years ago. If anything ever happened, the mayor stopped at the window, looking down at the city he governed. Memories flooded his mind. Their secret wedding on a quiet beach, the birth of their children, weekend barbecues at the lake house, quiet nights spanning their future, all of it now threatened by one judge's racist decision. His private phone buzzed. A text from Michael, their oldest son. "Dad, something's happened to Mom. They're saying it's on the news. What's going on?" Before he could reply, District Attorney Rachel Chen's call came through James. She said, skipping formal greetings, "I just heard this is completely irregular. Harrison has gone too far this time." Rachel James' voice was tight with emotion. "I need you to understand something, Sarah Thompson. She's my wife." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. "Your water finally managed. How is that possible? We've worked together for 3 years. We kept it private to protect our family," James explained, sinking into his chair. "But now I have to go public. I can't let her spend 25 years in prison for carrying her mother's heart medication in the wrong bottle." Rachel's legal mind was already working. "This changes everything. Harrison has no idea. He just sentenced the mayor's wife to life in prison. The press will have a field day when they find out. But more importantly, this level of sentencing for a first-time minor offense, James. This could expose years of his discriminatory practices." A knock at the door interrupted them. James' chief of staff, Tom Wilson, entered with a stack of papers. "Sir, we got reporters gathering in the lobby. Someone leaked that you canceled all your meetings after the Thompson sentencing. They're asking questions." James straightened his thigh and stood up in that moment. "You wasn't just a worried husband. He was a mayor preparing for battle." Rachel, "Start reviewing Harrison's past cases. I want every instance of racial bias documented." Tom, "Call a press conference for 5 p.m. It was time the truth was known by all today." As his team sprang into action, James opened the drawer in his desk and took out a small picture of himself, Sarah, and their children at the lake house last summer, all smiling, happy and free. He gently touched the face of Sarah in the picture. "I'm going to make this right," he whispered, promising. The afternoon sun continued to shine through the windows of City Hall today, but storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. In just a few hours, Mayor James Mitchell would step up to a podium that shocked the city with a truth that would set in motion events none of them could have predicted. That, locked in her cell at county jail, Sarah did not know her husband was on the brink of risking it all: his career, their privacy, their assiduously constructed life to rescue her from a justice system that had betrayed her. The clock on the wall marked off the minutes until 5 p.m. Each second drew them closer to a moment that would alter the texture of life. District Attorney Rachel Chen sat late into the night, surrounded by stacks of case files. The soft gloss of her desk lamp cast shadows on the walls as she reviewed Judge Harrison's past rulings. Her small office on the 3rd floor of the courthouse felt more like a war room now. "This can't be a coincidence," she muttered, marking another troubling case with a yellow of sticky note. Her assistant, Tom Parker, had helped her pull every case Judge Harrison had presided over in the last 5 years. The pattern they were discovering was disturbing. In case after case, the numbers told a clear story. Black defendants received sentences that were 3 to 4 times longer than white defendants for the same crimes Hispanic defendants were dealt with similarly. Such was the disparity that Rachel wondered how no one had noticed it until she reached for her coffee cup again, just to see that it was empty for the 3rd time that night. As she got up to refill, her phone buzzed with a text from Mayor Mitchell. Any progress? Rachel tied her hair back, quickly found 47 cases, so far all of which showed clear bias. Meeting tomorrow row at 8 a.m. The response came immediately, "You'll be there." Just then Tom rushed into her office holding a thick folder. His usually neat tie was loose, and his sleeves were rolled up from hours of digging through old record. "Miss Chun, you need to see this," he said, placing the folder on her desk. "I found Judge Harrison's records from his private practice days before he became a judge." Rachel opened the folder and started reading. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents. Before becoming a judge, Harrison had represented several organizations known for their discriminatory practices. He even wrote legal opinions supporting segregation in private schools. "There's more," Tom said, pulling out several newspaper clippings. In 1985, he was part of a law firm that tried to block the construction of a black church in his neighborhood. The case was dismissed, but his name is all over the paperwork. Rachel leaned back in her chair, digesting this. This goes deeper than we thought. It's not just about the case of Sarah Thompson anymore. This is about 15 years of systematic discrimination. From the bench, she picked up her phone and dialed Judge Martinez's number, the head of the Judicial Review Board. Despite the lateness of the hour, he answered on the second ring. "David, I'm sorry to call so late, but this can't wait. We have evidence of long-term judicial misconduct by Judge Harrison. I need an emergency hearing." While she talked, Tom continued sorting through files, occasionally passing her sticky notes with important details on her computer screen. A spreadsheet showed the growing list of cases where Harrison's sentences deviated significantly from state guidelines, are always harsher for minorities. After hanging up, Rachel walked to her office window. The city lights twinkled below. Somewhere out there, Sarah Thompson was spending her first night in prison away from her children, all because of one judge's prejudice. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. A young clerk, Jessica Wong, entered, carrying another box of files. "M. Chun, I found these in the basement archives. They're Judge Harrison's cases from his first year on the bench." Rachel nodded, tearfully but gratefully. "But them with the others." "And Jessica, thank you for staying late." As Jessica left, Rachel's phone busted again. This time it was a news alert. Mayor Mitchell to make unprecedented personal statement tomorrow regarding Thompson case. She knew James was taking a huge risk by going public about his marriage to Sarah, but as she looked at the mountains of evidence piling up in her office, she knew it was the right move. This wasn't just about one case anymore. It was about justice itself. Tom appeared at her door again. "Should we go home? It's almost midnight." Rachel shook her head, picking up another file. "Not yet. Sarah Thompson doesn't get to go home tonight. Neither do all the other people Harrison wrongly sentenced. The least we can do is keep working." She turned back to her desk, determined to build a case that would not only free Sarah, but expose 15 years of judicial corruption. Outside her window, the night grew deeper, but inside her office, the lights stayed on, illuminating the path toward justice. Tomorrow would bring Mayor Mitchell's revelation and the media storm that would follow, but tonight, in a quiet office filled with paper trails of injustice, Rachel Chun and her team were laying the groundwork for a case that would shake the entire judicial system. The City Hall press room buzzed with energy. At 4:45 p.m., reporters from each local station and major network filled the chairs. Their cameras were charged. None of them knew why Mayor James MIT that called an emergency press conference, but rumors were flying in about its connection to the shocking Thompson sentencing. James stood behind the stage. Smoothing his tie for the 10th time, his chief of staff Tom Wilson reviewed the prepared statement with him one last time. The mayor's hands shook slightly as he held the paper, thinking about Sarah spending her second night in prison. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Tom asked quietly. "Once you make this announcement, there's no going back. Your private life, your children's lives, everything will change." James looked at the wedding ring he now wore openly on his finger. usually kept hidden in his pocket during public appearances. Sarah's that was worth it. The truth is worth it. At precisely 5 p.m., Mayor Mitchell walked to the podium. Camera flashes lit up the room like lightning. He gripped the sides of the podium, looked directly into the main camera, and began speaking. Good evening. Today, I stand before you not just as your mayor, but as a husband and father. He paused as his voice grew stronger. Sarah Thompson, who was sentenced to life in prison yesterday by Judge William Harrison, is my wife. The room erupted in gasps and exclamations. Reporters jumped to their feet, chopping flashing cameras. Unanswered questions. James raised his hand for silence. For 12 years, we have kept our marriage private to protect our 3 beautiful children and to allow Sarah to live a normal life away from politics. That privacy has now become a weapon used against her. He pulled out a family photo from his pocket and held it up. This is our family. Sarah is not just case number 47,800 cases ready for the question she knew would come. Judge Harrison's sentence is not just an attack on my wife, James continued, his voice rising. With controlled anger, it is a symptom of a deeper problem in our justice system, a problem of bias and discrimination that has gone unchecked for far too long. At the county jail, inmates and guards alike had congregated around the TV in the common area to watch the press conference. In her cell, Sarah sat on her bed, tears streaming down her face as she watched her husband risk everything for her. Meanwhile, back at City Hall, James announced the preliminary findings of Rachel's investigation. Preliminary review shows that Judge Harrison has consistently given minorities sentences 3 to 4 times longer than those given to white defendants for the same crimes. This ends today. Reporters scribbled frantically, phones buzzed with breaking news alerts, and social media exploded with the revelation in his chambers. Judge Harrison watched the press conference, his face growing paler with each word. I am calling for an immediate review of all cases presided over by Judge Harrison. James announced, and I am formally requesting that the State Judicial Review Board investigate his fit to serve on the bench. He then spoke directly into the camera, his voice softening. To our children watching at home, Michael, Lisa, and James, I'm sorry we had to hide our family for so long, but I am not sorry for standing up for what's right. Your mother will come home. Questions came like a tsunami. Reporters shouted over each other, cameras clicked, and the room felt electric with energy. James answered each question calmly, revealing more about their life together, about Sarah's case, and about the investigation into the people of the city witnessed through the windows of their homes, how their mayor transformed from a politician to a husband fighting for his wife in social networks. Hashtag Justice for Rosara and hashtag Investigate Harrison became viral at the end of the press conference. James walked away from that stage, knowing his life would never be the same again. Checking his phone and seeing the text message from his son, Dad, you are amazing. Mom will be proud. He knew he did the right thing. The truth had finally been brought to the surface, and like a stone thrown into still water, the ripples would go far beyond one family, one judge, or one city. The fight for justice was only just beginning. The morning after Mayor Mitchell's revelation, veteran reporter Maria Sant sat at her desk at the Daily Chronicle, surrounded by old newspapers and dusty files. Her editor had given her one mission: dig deep into Judge William Harrison's past. 20 years as an investigative journalist had taught her that everyone had secrets. Judge Harrison, she would soon discover, had more than most. You won't believe what I just found, said her young assistant Kevin, racing toward her desk with a stack of yellowed papers. They were membership records from an elite country club from the 1990s. Judge Harrison's name appeared not just as a member, but as board chairman during a time when the club openly refused membership to minorities. Maria had adjusted her reading glasses and begun typing on her computer. The story was coming together, piece by piece, like a dark puzzle. Her phone buzzed constantly with tips from people who had encountered Harrison over the years. A retired COR house clerk called in with stories of Harrison's early days as a judge. He used to make racist jokes in his chambers. The clerk whispered, still fear in his voice after all these years. Nobody said anything. He had too much power. By midday, Mariah's office wall looked like a detective's investigation board. Photos, newspaper clippings, and sticky notes connected Harrison's past activities with red string. The pattern was clear. Decades of discrimination hiding behind a judge's robe. "Look at this," Kevin said, pointing to his computer screen. He had discovered Harrison's college yearbook on the internet, and a young Harrison proudly stood with a fraternity infamous for its racially discriminatory policies. The caption at the bottom of the photo read, "Keeping traditions alive." Mariah's biggest surprise came when she received an anonymous email. It included scanned copies of private letters Harrison had written to various organizations in the 1980s. In one letter, he argued against integrating local schools. In another, he supported policies to keep certain neighborhoods pure print. These, Maria told Kevin, her hands shaking slightly, and called Judge Harrison's office for comment. "They need to know what's coming." At the courthouse, Harrison sat in his chambers watching his career crumble. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since Mayor Mitchell's press conference. Now reporters were asking questions about his past that he had worked hard to keep buried. His secretary knocked on the door. "Sir, the Davie Chronicle is calling. They have some questions about your involvement with the Pine Valley Country Club in 199-2." Harrison's face went pale. He remembered those board meetings, the votes to keep people out, the careful wording they used to hide their real reasons. He never thought those records would surface. Back at the Chronicle, Maria received more documents from other journalists who joined the investigation. A reporter in Chicago found some cases from Harrison's time as a lawyer, where he consistently took on cases that involved defense of discriminatory practices. A journalist in Atlanta found his connections with or organizations known for advocating racial segregation. Kevin rushed in again, this time with printouts from social media. People were sharing their own experiences with Harrison. A black law student described how Harrison had questioned her presence in his courtroom, assuming she was a defendant rather than a legal intern. A Hispanic attorney recalled Harrison mocking his accent during a trial. "We're ready to publish," Maria told her editor, laying out the evidence. "This goes beyond Sarah Thompson's case. Harrison has been using his power to hurt minorities for decades." The editor reviewed the story carefully. It would fill the whole front page of tomorrow's paper. The headline would read, "Judd Why is Dark PST 3 Decades of Discrimination Unearthed." As the story went to print, Maria looked out her office window. At the courthouse across the street, Harrison was still inside, no doubt, trying to figure out how to salvage what was left of his reputation. But the truth, so long buried, was finally breaking free. Her phone buzzed one final time. That day it was a text from Sarah Thompson's teenage son, Michael. He had dug up her number and sent a simple message: "Thank you for telling me the truth about a man who stole my mother away from me." Maria coughed, wiping at the tear in her eye, and started to pack up her files. Tomorrow the city would wake up to the full story of Judge Harrison's past, and his carefully constructed image as respected judge was bound to crumble under the weight of his own prejudices. In her cell, Sarah Thompson slept peacefully that night, unaware that come the following morning, tomorrow, she would be reading all about it. The truth was like sunlight and was about to disinfect decades of hidden darkness in their city's justice system. The morning after the Daily Chronicle's explosive story about Judge Harrison's past, the streets around the courthouse became a sea of peaceful protesters. People from every neighborhood in the city could be seen holding signs saying "Justice for Sarah" and "No room for racist judges." Reverend Marcus Johnson, a respected community leader, stood on the steps of the courthouse as he addressed the growing crowd. At 65, he had seen many protests, but this one was different. White, black, Hispanic, Asian people from all walks of life stood shoulder to shoulder. Now we are united, for today is a day when race or wealth won't do. Something stronger unites us all: our struggle for justice. One of the protesters, Michael Thompson Mitchell, spoke of his own children, 14-year-old Sarah and her siblings, as well as their grandmother, who stood with them. He held up a sign bearing a family photo with the words, "We need our mom home." News cameras honed in on the children, their faces becoming powerful symbols of injustice. Lisa Chin, a local restaurant owner, had closed up her eatery to join the protest. She handed out water bottles and sandwiches to protesters, remembering how Sarah used to come to her diner every morning for coffee before work. She always had a kind word for everyone, Lisa told a reporter. Now, it's our turn to stand up for her. Inside City Hall, Mayor James Mitchell watched the gathering crowd from his window. His phone buzzed with messages of support from mayors across the country. Even the governor had called, expressing concern about the situation. "Sir," his assistant interrupted. "Reverend Johnson is here with some community leaders. They had a proposition." The conference room soon filled with religious leaders, civil rights activists, and business owners. They presented the Unified Front, a citywide boycott of the judicial system until Harrison was removed and Sarah's case was reviewed. "We'll postpone all non-emergency cases," said attorney Mark Wilson. "Every lawyer who believes in justice will stand with us at the county jail." Sarah watched the protests on TV in the common room. Other inmates gathered around her, offering words of support. Even the guards seemed different today, some of them quietly offering her the hope of getting justice. Outside, the crowd had grown to thousands. Students from local colleges arrived with new energy and creative sense. "Judge Harrison, history will judge you. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." A bed above the crowd, Mrs. Peterson, Sarah's 70-year-old neighbor, sat in her wheelchair at the protest, holding a simple sign. She was taking my heart medicine. Her presence touched hearts and reminded everyone that Sarah's crime was an act of kindness. Social media exploded with support. #JusticeSephirSarah trended nationwide. Videos of the peaceful protests went viral. Celebrity activists shared the story, bringing national attention to the small city's fight for justice. Local businesses showed support in their own ways. The coffee shop where Sarah worked put up a huge "Reserve for Sarah" sign. On her usual table, the hospital where she worked nights displayed a banner reading "We Stand with Sarah" across it in trance. As evening approached, the protest transformed into thousands of lights flickered in the growing darkness, each flame representing hope for change. Rabbi David Stern stood with Imam Ahmad Hassan and Reverend Johnson, their united presence sending a powerful message. "When justice sleeps," Rabbi Stern said to the crowd, "it's our duty to wake it up." The children started a simple chant that spread through the crowd: "Bring our mother home, bring our mother home." Home in his home, Judge Harrison watched the news coverage, his hands shaking as he poured another drink. His phone rang constantly, reporters, angry citizens, even old friends distancing themselves from him. The carefully built walls of his prejudiced world were crumbling. Mayor Mitchell ended the day by visiting the protesters. He walked among them not as a mayor, but as Sarah's husband, thanking them for their support. When he reached his children, he hugged them tightly, whispering, "Mom would be so proud of you all." As night fell, most protesters went home, but a dedicated group remained, promising to return every day until justice was served. They set up a rotation schedule, made sure that the steps of the courthouse would never be empty. The last photo broadcasted on the evening news caught Michael placing his protest sign at the courthouse steps. Next to it, he placed a framed photo of his family's last Christmas together. The message couldn't be clearer. This wasn't just a legal case. This was about family, community, and a city's soul. The day had elapsed, but deep inside, all knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow would bring more supporters, more voices, and more determination to right a terrible wrong. The state appeals. The morning sunlight streamed through the panes and shone brightly inside courtroom 3 of the court building. Every seat was occupied as noted civil rights lawyer Benjamin Carter prepared to present Sarah's appeal. His reputation for fighting injustice had earned him the moniker the Justice Warrior. And today he was working for "Free Your Honors, Your Honors." Carter began, his deep voice filling the courtroom. What occurred in Judge Harrison's courtroom wasn't just a mistake, it was a crime against justice itself. The 3 appeals court judges leaned forward, listening carefully to Maria Rodriguez, known for her fair rulings, looked over the thick file of evidence before her. Judge Thomas Chin scrolled through his tablet, listing all the cases Harrison had presided over before. Judge Robert Wilson, the oldest of the 3, observed Carter intently from the gallery. Mayor James Mitchell sat there with his children. Michael, 2 weeks behind in school, was stubborn about not staying home. "Mom needs all of us here," he had insisted that morning. Rachel Chun, the district attorney, sat ready to present her findings, also about Harrison's pattern of discrimination. Carter presented the large screen showing statistics from Harrison's courtroom over 15 years. "Your Honors, Judge Harrison sentenced minorities to terms averaging 332% longer than white defendants for identical crimes. This isn't coincidence, this is racism." Wearing a judge's robe, the evidence kept coming. Former clerks testified about Harrison's racist comments in chambers. Court records showed his systematic bias. The Daily Chronicle's investigation findings were entered into evidence, showing decades of discriminatory behavior. During a break, Sarah's mother addressed the reporters outside. "My daughter was carrying my heart medicine," she said, her voice shaking. "Now she faces life in prison while I have to raise her children." Where is the justice in that? Back inside, Carter played security footage from Harrison's courtroom. It showed his different treatment of defendants based on their race, smiling at some, scowling at others, rushing through some cases while taking time with others. And now, Carter said, reaching the heart of his argument, we come to Sarah Thompson's case, a dutiful mother feeding her aged parents sentenced to life imprisonment for possessing prescription medicine in the wrong bottle. This is injustice. This is punishment for people. Judge Harrison has always detested Rachel Chun, then revealed her office's probe. We checked all cases Judge Harrison had been dealing with in the last 5 years, she revealed before the appeals court. The trend cannot be ignored. Him, who IED his seat to punish minorities. The prosecution, represented by State Attorney David Miller, offered little. The defense, the sentence may sound harsh, but he admitted the state realizes serious concerns about Judge Harrison's pattern of behavior. Outside, during lunch break, protesters chanted peacefully. They've been there every day since Sarah's sentencing. For numbers growing today, they held signs reading "Justice delayed is justice denied" and "Free Sarah now." Back in session, Carter delivered his closing argument. Your Honors, this case is bigger than Sarah Thompson. It's about trust in our justice system. Every time Judge Harrison let his prejudice affect a line he broke that trust, today you hold within your hands the ability to begin mending what he has broken. The judges retired to confer in the charged courtroom. Sarah's family clasped their hands and prayed. Reporters scratched in notebooks, waiting for history to unfold. Even the normally bustling core of House cafeteria was silent, everyone sitting in stillness, their eyes glued to phones. After hours, the judges emerged. Judge Rodriguez, having chosen to render their verdict, spoke into the microphone, clearing her throat. This court has studied the record carefully. She started the habit now. Discriminatory sentencing by Judge Harrison is not just concerning, but indeed a direct violation of constitutional rights and judicial ethics. The room held its collective breath. As we hereby vacate Sarah Thompson's sentence, Judge Rodriguez said. Furthermore, we are ordering a review of all CAS cases handled by Judge Harrison, with immediate priority to those currently incarcerated defendants. The courtroom erupted in cheers as Michael hugged his father. They were both crying openly. Rachel Chun smiled, knowing justice was finally being served. Judge Rodriguez added, once order was restored, we're referring Judge Harrison to the State Judicial Review Board for immediate suspension and investigation. Outside, the crowd of supporters burst into celebration when they heard the news. Church bells rang across the city. The Daily Chronicle's website crashed from too many people trying to read the breaking news. Carter packed his briefcase, satisfied. He had won many cases, but this one felt different. This wasn't just about one person's freedom, it was about changing a broken system. As the sun set on the courthouse, the news spread throughout the city. Sarah Thompson was coming home, but everybody knew this was just the beginning, for true justice is far from over. The day Sarah Thompson walked out of the prison was bright and sunny. She stood at the gates to link with the sunlight, wearing the same navy blue dress as when she had walked into court 3 weeks ago, but this time, instead of fear in her eyes, was joy. Mayor James Mitchell waited with their children, no longer hiding their relationship. Michael ran to his mother, first wrapping his arms around her. Lisette and young James followed. Creating a family group hug brought tears to the eyes of reporters who watched. I love you all so much, whispered Sarah, holding her children tight. When she reached James, they shared their first public kiss as husband and wife, no longer bound by secrecy. Across town, Judge Harrison cleared out his chambers. The State Judicial Review Board had suspended him pending a full investigation. His face, once proud and arrogant, now showed the strain of his fall from power. As he packed his books, a group of protesters outside chanted, "Justice wins, racism fails." At the Daily Chronicle, Maria Santos typed the final words of her latest article. Judge Harrison's resignation leads to review of 2,000 cases. Her investigation had helped uncover not just one wrong sentence, but 15 years of judicial misconduct that had hurt countless families. The mayor's office became a center of reform. James and Sarah worked together openly, now turning their painful experience into positive change. They established the Justice Reform Initiative, a program to review every case in which bias may have affected sentencing. Every individual deserves equal treatment by the law, Sarah declared at the launching ceremony of the initiative. She stood up straight and strong. What was done to me was deplorable. That if this can repair our flawed system, then Some good has come out from my ordeal. Changes came fast. The state Supreme Court directed all judges across the state to undergo mandatory training on bias. Some new rules required that there be regular reviews made about the patterns of sentencing. Other cities started reviewing their judicial systems as well, looking for similar problems. Sarah returned back to her normal life, but things were different now. When she went back to her job at the diner, customers stood and clapped. At the hospital, where she works nights, her co-workers had organized a welcome back party. Her story had touched people's hearts and opened their eyes. Michael, their oldest son, started a student group at his high school called Youth for Justice. They studied civil rights history and learned how to fight discrimination legally. My mom taught me, standing up for what's right was worth any price. He announced to his classmates. The Thompson Mitchell family moved into the mayor's residence together, no longer needing to hide their love. The first Sunday dinner as a public family was covered by the local news. The image of Sarah serving her mother's favorite meal, surrounded by her loving family, became a symbol of restored justice. District Attorney Radel Chin's office worked overtime, reviewing Harrison's old cases. Each day brought new stories of lives affected by his bias. One by one, the unjust sentences were overturned. Families reunified, errors made right. The city transformed. Two individuals who had never cared about judicial bias before started paying attention to the court processes. Community groups set up court-watching programs. Citizens asked for accountability from their judges. At the lake house, where the family used to hide their weekends together, they now had public gatherings. Sarah started a support group for families affected by judicial bias. We're not hiding anymore, she told them. We're fighting for change together. 1 month after her release, Sarah stood once again, this time on the courthouse steps. She was not a defendant, but a speaker at a justice reform rally. She looked out at the crowd and saw faces of all colors, united in the cause of fairness. My story, of course, had a happy ending, she said, her voice ringing strong and clear, but so many others still await justice. Our work is far from done until every person who enters these courts is judged by their actions, not their race, James wrote, watching his wife speak, proud of her strength and dignity. Their private love had become a public force for change. Their children sat next to them, no longer ashamed of who they were, as the sun set on the courthouse that evening. Sarah and James walked home, hand in hand. Their children ran ahead of them. They passed the diner where she still worked morning shifts, the hospital where she still helped on nights, and the community center where she now taught others about their rights. The city had changed, a system had been shaken, justice was restored, and a family that once hid in the shadows now walked in the light and showed others the way toward a fairer future. We did it, Sarah whispered to James as they reached home. Really did it? He shook his head. No, he replied, squeezing her hand. We're just getting started.